Hey everyone, I have a designer showcase for you today. We are sewing up the Raccoon Case by Pink Pony Designs. Pink Pony patterns were some of the very first patterns that I started sewing up, and this is a great free pattern that is available at the website, or you can get your copy in the Pink Pony Designs Facebook group. There are a lot of sunglasses patterns out there. This is a really good one for practicing sewing curves. You use one side of the zipper for this zipper installation, so it's a really good one to sew two at a time so that you can use both sides of your zipper at once. So let's get going. For this tutorial, you will need your exterior and lining fabrics cut to the measurements provided in the pattern. You will need your stabilizer piece. I have cut mine to be 1 inch shorter and 1 inch narrower than the measurements given in the pattern, and you will also need your curve template. I'm going to be showing you how to adjust your lining so that it fits snugly inside of your exterior, and I'm also going to show you a way to make this pattern so that it doesn't have raw edges or need binding on the inside. The first thing that we're going to do is shape the curve on our exterior and lining pieces. My pieces are interfaced, but I have not yet applied my stabilizer. Take the template that you were provided in the pattern and place it at the top of your exterior piece, and you want it to line up with the short edge. So we're going to be shaping the curve just at one of the short ends. You're going to do the same on your exterior and your lining. Make sure that you check your 1 inch square. Take your stabilizer. If you are using non-fusible stabilizer, you can use a double-sided webbing to fuse that to your exterior, or you can quilt it. I am using fusible foam for mine, and I'm going to shape it to fit the curve that we just cut. I like to keep my foam out of my seam allowance, which is why I have cut it shorter and narrower than the given measurements. I'm just going to draw in the curve at the top here. This won't be the same as my template piece because my stabilizer is smaller, so I'm just roughly drawing that in, and then I will trim those upper corners off. My stabilizer piece is made by sewing 2 pieces of stabilizer together with a zigzag stitch. This is a really good scrap busting pattern because it just uses fairly small pattern pieces, and because we will be folding the finished pattern in half, it was a really good pattern for using up 2 narrower pieces of foam that I had in my scrap bin. I'm going to place this in the middle of my exterior on the wrong side, and I'm going to fuse that. Because I am using foam, I'm going to be using steam in order to fuse that. So I'm going to spritz that with water, cover it with the Teflon sheet, and then adhere that to my exterior. That piece is fused, so I'm going to set that aside while we work on our lining piece. If you want to follow the pattern as written, you can leave your lining piece as is. The problem with the lining piece as is that it tends to be a little bit loose inside of the exterior. So I'm going to show you a way to taper this piece so that it fits snugly inside of your finished sunglasses case. Flip it over and draw a line straight down the middle of that piece. We're then going to make a mark that is about 1.5 inches down from the upper edge, and then make a second mark 3/4 of an inch above that. What we're now going to do is cut the lining piece. We're going to cut the lining piece so that we can take some of the excess out of the center of that lining so that it sits more smoothly inside of our sunglasses case. This is also going to allow us to make a turning hole in the middle, which will let us finish the end of our bag without using any binding or having any raw edges. So we're cutting straight up the middle to the mark that we made 1.5 inches down from the curve. Fold that cut lining piece in half, and then you're going to take your ruler and you're going to draw a line from the mark that we made 3/4 of an inch up from this point down to the straight edge, coming in about 1/2 inch from where our center mark is. So 1/2 inch here up to this mark that is 3/4 of an inch from the top of our cut. We're also going to make 2 marks, one that is 1.5 inches from the straight end and another that is 3 inches above that. So we have our diagonal line here the lining is open, and we have a mark here, here, and here. We're going to be sewing this section here, leaving this open as a turning hole, and then sewing this section here so it is essentially a dart in the middle of our lining piece. When we sew the dart, rather than backstitch at the top here, we are going to take long tails and tie them off securely so that we don't have excess bulk at the point of the dart there. So we're sewing two sections between this point and this point, leaving a gap open and sewing this section to the end here. Starting at the straight end, using a shorter stitch length, backstitching, and sewing up to this first mark. Going to backstitch again away from the opening to reduce any visible threads within that turning hole. Leave that gap and start again at the mark at the other end of the opening, starting further away, backstitching up to the mark, again to keep the threads away from the opening, and sew straight down. And I'm sewing past this 1.5 inch mark all the way up to this mark here. The edge of the opening is here. We're going to be coming outside of that, come up to this point where we'll take long tails to tie off to secure the top of that dot in our lining. You can backstitch there if you like. It just will be a little bulkier than it would be if you just take tails. These tails are probably not quite long enough. I'm just going to tie those off. So I've got my section sewn here, I have a gap, and then this section sewn here. What I'm now going to do is fold that seam allowance out and press it flat. So we have our lining that has this tapered section in the middle, and we have our exterior with our stabilizer fused to the back. Take your zipper, and what I like to do first is check that I can get my pull on and find where the center point is. So go to the end of your zipper and decide which side to start on. This is one long length of zipper folded in half, so there's no obvious starting point. Place your pull and pull it all the way to the end. And now we're going to treat our zipper the same way as we would for any other zipper that came straight off the roll like this. So we're going to go to the end and we're going to make note of which tooth is further out. And for me, it's the one on the right side. So I'm going to mark that. And I'm also going to mark the center point at the top. Now I can take my zipper off. You can singe those ends if you like. We're also going to mark the center of our lining and our exterior. I'm marking the center of the exterior at the top and at the bottom. The lining, I've only marked at the top because I have the seam in the center bottom, but if you are not tapering your lining the way I have done, then also mark the center bottom of your lining piece. Take your zipper tape and you're going to place it so that it's teeth side down, matching up the center mark with the center on the exterior. And then we're going to go along to the edge and see where it starts to go around the curve. And it is about 1.5 inches from the center mark. And it continues down about 4 inches from there. So what I'm going to do is put some small snips on either side of this zipper tape, starting 1.5 inches down from the center point and continuing 4 inches below that. The snips within your zipper tape stay within about 3/16 of an inch of the outside edge, which is within the seam allowance and far enough away from the zipper that it won't cause any problems with fraying. I know a lot of people worry about snipping into your zipper, but if you have a zipper tape that has this weave in it, that will stop any fraying at the snips from traveling into where your zipper is. If your zipper tape doesn't have that weave, then you're not going to want to snip it. Zipper tape that has a striped pattern that goes across the width of the zipper is a particularly problematic zipper tape if you put snips in it, but other zipper tape shouldn't be a problem. If you're worried at all, you can always apply fray check to your snips to further secure your threads. The reason that we have to snip is because for this pattern, the zipper tape itself is essentially a gusset. And in order to get a gusset to fit around the curve of your main body piece, you have to place snips into it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a wobbly zipper or a zipper that does not sit nicely against the edge of your exterior. Take your double-sided tape and you're going to place double-sided tape all the way around the outside edge of your exterior. Remove the backing from your double-sided tape and line up the center point on the exterior and the zipper, and then working one side at a time, ease the zipper tape around the curve, pressing it down, lining up the raw edge of the zipper tape with the outside edge of your exterior, and continue down the straight side. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I like to check that my zipper tape is approximately even on either end. Once you're happy with the placement of your zipper tape, we're going to baste around the outside edge of the zipper tape at 1/8 of an inch, sewing through the zipper tape and the exterior. And we're going to do our best to keep the zipper tape up to the curved edge. This is just a basting stitch, so I'm using a longer stitch length, and I don't need a back stitch. Take your lining and you're going to apply double-sided tape around the outside edge of this piece also. If you don't like to use double-sided tape, you can use clips instead. Because we've tapered our lining, when we go to place it on our exterior, the top is going to be the same shape at the curve, but the sides are going to be pulling in a little. We're going to remove the backing from the double-sided tape on one side of the lining. And then we're going to place that right sides down with the exterior, matching up the lower edge and the center point. And then pressing it down around the curve, lining up the raw edges all the way around. I'm going to place a couple of clips at the top. You can put some basting stitches in here too if you like. Once you're happy with that positioning, remove the backing from the other side of your lining. Let's pop a clip here to keep it secure at the outside. This is where it's going to pull the most. Line up the lower edge on the other side. You can see here the effect of the taper. And press that down, and we're just worrying about matching up the curve and the side. Don't worry about the pulling in the center. Just do your best to get it to press down evenly around the outside edge. And this pulling will take care of itself when we finish sewing up our sunglasses case. I'm adding clips on top of that double-sided tape just for extra security because of the pulling here in the middle. And what we're now going to do is sew around this entire outside edge, leaving the bottom open. We're sewing at 3/8 of an inch. If you're using narrower zipper tape, if you've used size 3 instead, you're going to use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So we're sewing around the entire outside, and we want to make sure that we're keeping the edges lined up and straight and not worrying about any of this in the middle of our sunglasses case. It is supposed to be like that. If you have not tapered your lining, yours will be sitting nice and flat. Backstitch well at the beginning. Using a shorter stitch length, we're going to sew all the way around the edge making sure that all of our layers are lining up. We're sewing through the exterior, the zipper tape, and the lining. Do your best to keep a nice even seam allowance as you go around the curves, and that will give you the best shape on your finished sunglasses case. Check that you're happy with the shape of that curve and the evenness of your seam allowance, and that the lining hasn't pulled away from the edge too much at any one point. We're going to clip around the curve here so that when we turn our raccoon case out, we can get a nice even curve, or you can use pinking shears to trim that seam allowance. You can apply fray check to these snips, again, if you feel concerned about it. We are going to be top stitching through that, so that will also help reduce the likelihood of any fraying. I'm going to put a link to a Spencer Ogg video that talks about the zipper tape itself. That might give you a little bit more confidence when snipping into your zipper. It's a really great watch. I just like to put a little drip at the tip of the snip. Turn your raccoon case out through the opening and smooth out those curves. I'm going to make a particular point of smoothing my exterior away from the zipper teeth because as it is wider than my lining with the taper, it doesn't want to pull away on its own. If you look at the lining, you can see that it's naturally pulling away. On the exterior, it's bunching up a little. So I'm going to make a point of smoothing that out before I top stitch. We're now going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch around the entire outside edge. Because I am going to be turning my bag out rather than binding or having the raw seam there, I am going to start my stitches about 3/4 of an inch from the straight lower edge. I'm going to start them with long tails that'll then pull through to the back, but you can back stitch there if that's your preference. I'm going to sew all the way around. If you are not using the turning hole, then you can sew the whole way from one end to the other and you can back stitch. So starting with the long tails a little ways up from the straight edge, using a longer stitch length, I'm just going to sew all the way around. I'm sewing with my exterior up so that I can make sure that it is smoothed away from that zipper tape. Take it nice and slowly as you come around the curve. So a couple of stitches at a time, pivot to get a nice smooth stitch line. And then I'm going to stop 3/4 of an inch from the other edge. If you are not turning through the lining, you can keep going all the way down. And I'm going to pull those tails through to the inside and tie those off. Take your zipper pull and we're going to slide that on, starting from the side that I marked earlier. Slide it on so the zipper teeth are just shy of the back of the zipper pull. Slide in the other side to meet it, then slide the first side down until I feel them click, and then push from the back of the zipper. If they don't line up, you can adjust within the zipper pull, and you want your teeth to be back in the same order as they were when we started so that your zipper lines up properly in your finished project. Sometimes it takes a little bit of readjustment. You want to make sure that there are no skipped teeth. And slide it all the way on. If you are not turning your bag through the turning hole, then open your zipper back out It can help to just put a clip or something at the end so that your zipper pull doesn't come all the way off. You can also baste over that if you like, and then turn it so that the wrong side is out. Mine's a little tight because of the tapered lining. If you are not doing the tapered lining, yours will not be tight. But what you'll then do is sew down this end and either bind over that section or zigzag to secure the threads. I am turning mine through the turning holes, so I actually need to turn my bag all the way back inside out. It's going to be easier to do with the puller, so I'm just going to take that off for the moment. Once it's the wrong way out, I'm going to slide my pull back on. Slide it towards the center. And now we need to close up the bottom here. We're going to push the zipper teeth towards the exterior and line up the straight edge of the lining and the straight edge of the exterior. You can choose to fold the seam at the bottom there up, or you can leave it down. It doesn't matter how you do it. Then we're going to fold it at the center mark that we made earlier and press that all the way down. And at this point, you can choose if you want to sew over your zipper teeth or if you want to stop shy of the zipper teeth and leave a gap where the zipper tape is and then sew on the other side. And that will give you that curved zipper end. If you sew over the zipper teeth, you will have a slightly more pinched look to that corner. So we're going to sew down here, either all the way across, or we're going to stop just shy of the zipper and then continue along the other side. Another option that you can do is, rather than fold your lining like this, is flatten this piece out and make the center mark line up with the center of your zipper teeth on the exterior and on the lining. And then you're going to sew those two seams together along this edge. And then you turn it out, and then you have a slightly different shape to your finished pouch, but you will have a nice flat zipper rather than have the zipper curving around the top corner. Sewing from that top fold where the center mark is, using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, sew straight down the end towards the zipper teeth that are pointed towards the exterior. Actually, for the moment, we can tuck them away from the exterior so we can get closer to them, but then we'll move them when we sew the lining part. Just keep it lined up, and we're going to stop about 1/4 of an inch shy of where those zipper teeth are. And just keep them out of the way. Back stitch. Then tuck those teeth up towards the exterior. Make sure that seam allowance is folded over. And we're going to sew the other way. And we're going to sew from the center seam at the bottom up this side, and we're going to stop just shy of where the edge of that seam allowance is. You want to do your best to keep your zipper tape straight, not rolling at all, so that it will be nice and even on your finished raccoon case. Back stitching. Sewing up to the edge of the seam allowance and back stitching again. Trim that seam allowance in the top corner there and trim your threads. And what we then need to do is turn our sewn raccoon case out through this opening in the lining. Poke that bottom corner out. And then I just push slightly on that zipper tape to pull out the curve, and you can see we have that V shape here. Gives us a neat rounded edge. And if you like, once you have that position where you want it to be, you can open out your seam allowance here. You can do the same on your lining if you prefer, and you can just put some hand stitches at the edge to secure that to the seam allowance. When I did my video on this style of zipper end, some people were concerned that it may pull out. It is quite hard to pull it out. You can see, you can tug on it pretty hard and it's hard to get it out. But if you're worried about it, you can put some stitches just from the zipper tape to the seam allowance, and that will just secure that end in place so that it doesn't pull out. I'm going to check the fit of our lining. You can see that it is nice and snug. And when you're happy with how that all looks, you can close up this opening. You can close that up with a ladder stitch, or you can close it up on your sewing machine. Just pull it up. When your edges are opposed, use your preferred method for closing it up. If you sew it on your sewing machine, you're going to end up with a little bit of a ridge there. If you decide to use a hand stitch to ladder stitch it closed, then you will get a nice flat finish on your pouch. However you decide to do it, I like to start a little further along from my opening. Secure my stitches either with a back stitch or with a secure knot. If you're using your sewing machine, sew as close to the fold as you can. Trim your threads and then tuck your lining in. Poke the lining corner down into the exterior corner and smooth it out. Give it a press if you need to, and then you're all finished. So we have our raccoon case. We have done the rounded corner at the end, although you do have several other options for finishing off your zipper. On the inside, we have a nice snug fitting lining, and we have no raw edges. And here are just some options for other ways of finishing up your zipper. If you do it the way that I demonstrated, when you fold the exterior and the lining to be flat, lining up the center with your zipper tape, then you get this shape on your finished raccoon case. Or you could even do an extended zipper, and then you can close up the edge of your raccoon case just like you would with a zipper pouch. So those are a couple of other really good options. But of course, for a simpler sew, you can follow along with the pattern as written. As I said, it is available for free in the Pink Pony Designs Facebook group, or you can grab it on the website. Hope that helps. Thanks, everyone.